welcome to Hornet Sports Buzz. Yep, I'm back. It's year 2 of Hornet Sports Buzz. It's the fall. Today's September 11th. We're filming. The fall sports season's just getting started. Mansfield teams have probably in week 1 or 2, depending on the sport. We're going to get into that. We're going to have many episodes during the year, which you're all going to love, I know. What better way to do a preview is we're going to kick it off with a broad Hockomock League preview. And with us, we have a special guest, Josh Perry. Josh Perry, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Josh's second time. He came maybe last September, October, I think.
Yeah, about around the same time. Yep.
Yeah, so all you new parents or fans out there, I know you longtime veterans know all about HockomockSports.com, but we're going to have Josh give it a little bit background. I think it's, we were just talking off air, I think it's year 10. So Josh, you tell me a little bit about the background of HawkSports.com and then a little bit of your background, how you and Ryan Lanigan, your co-founder, got into it.
Yeah, Ryan founded the site about a decade ago. I jumped in about a year or so, year and a half after he had started it. At the time, I was working for Attleboro Patch, so I knew a little bit about the league, and I'd worked for Attleboro Cable for a while as well. This was right around the time when Attleboro was joining the league, so it sort of worked out. And yeah, we've been going strong for, I think this is our 7th or 8th fall together, and site keeps growing. We keep trying to add different features to it, different things that we can add. This year we added a golf and cross country preview to our fall lineup, which was, I think important to try to get other sports involved. And yeah, we just continue to keep growing, trying to promote and shine a spotlight on the great teams and great athletes that we have in the Hawk.
That's great. And if you've watched this show in the past, we reference HawkSports.com all the time. That's where we get most of our information, and from the coaches. But if you go HawkSports.com, again, this is not a paid advertisement. I invited Josh to come on the show. But if you look at their homepage, there's the homepage which gives you a view of everything you want. There's the blog. We're going to cover these schedules, standings, Hawk 5, which we're going to talk about, photos. Player of the week poll, which I think it's kind of hand in hand, right?
Yeah, so we do a player of the week every week, and we like to put out a poll so that way people can have their say. In the end, we make the choice, but I think it's great to be able to be interactive and have people jump in and be able to vote for their friends, their teammates, classmates.
So what a great
children probably.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Great segue. This week, week 1, if you've been paying attention, Michael DeBolt of Mansfield football. I think he had 2 touchdowns. He's the kicker, 4 extra points, a field goal. I think he kicked a couple balls into the end zone on kickoff. So was it a tough choice? And I know, if your daughter runs cross country or plays field hockey, or your son is on the soccer team and he has a hat trick. It's the vote. How much of the voting is? And how much do you and Josh? You and Ryan weigh in.
So a lot of it comes from us and trying to weigh, like you said, there's a lot of sports that we're trying to consider, a lot of great athletes that had done a lot of great stuff. We had a couple of girls soccer players that scored 4 goals during the week. So we're trying to balance a lot of that. Mike's performance on Friday night was fantastic, and there's a lot of hype around Mansfield football this year, and that was a great start for them. Yep. And to come out with 19 points like he did, and just hours after he had announced that he was dedicating his season to a charity as well, which I think is it's great to be able to recognize that part of it as well.
So. And I'm not sure, we can look at the link. I know it's pediatric cancer, I believe, and on the site. We can put a link up. Coach Redding hopefully will come on in the next few weeks. Maybe we'll, I'm not good at segues, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about football. We're going to cover a lot of subjects. There's eight different leagues that Josh and Ryan cover. Football, boys and girls soccer, field hockey, volleyball, golf, boys and girls cross country. We can't talk about all of them today, but mostly going to focus on football, soccer, and maybe a little field hockey and golf. But the football team, and again, it's hard. This is, as you know, it's mostly a Mansfield show, but we're going to cover the Hawk. Just overview, you already mentioned Mansfield off air that you think they're going to do well, but who else is looking good, or you think? There's only been 1 game so far for most teams, right?
Most teams have only played 1. A couple of teams start off this week. Attleboro will take on Milford on Saturday. This will be Attleboro's first game. I believe they're the only ones that sat out week 1. I'm trying to just remember the schedule off the top of my head. But I think Mansfield, certainly coming into the season, is not just one of the top teams in our league, but probably one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the state. And as usual, King Philip will be right there with them, whether neck and neck or just behind maybe to start the season, just because of the number of players that Mansfield and the amount of talent that Mansfield brought back. But both of them are top 10 teams in the state for sure. And you really feel like while Division II is loaded, teams like Natick and Barnstable, Bridgewater Raynham, there's a lot of talent there. You really feel like it's going to come down to Mansfield KP once again, not only for the Kelly Rex Division title, but also for really for the D2 South title and a trip to Gillette.
So when you talk about hype, I know you're an insider, obviously, and you follow all the sports. But how do you, and this kind of segues to how do you preview all the sports? I mean, you and Ryan have tremendous recollection and history on the website, which you can check out on the history tab, among other places. But how do you, aside from your knowledge, how do you know the hype? Do you talk to other coaches or captains, or how does that work?
Well, I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be a big year for Mansfield just because of the talent that they had in their junior class that's now seniors. So coming off of last season, knowing that so much of last season was defined by the injuries that they suffered, and they were still so close, despite really having a third string quarterback. Aiden Sacco had to jump in as an emergency quarterback for the bulk of the season. Sincere Gill emerged as a sophomore last year. He's coming back. Vinny Holmes, obviously, coming back. TJ Guy was our underclassman of the year last year, so he's back on the line. But players like Michael DeBolt, Nick Marciano, players that got hurt over the course of last season also were back. So, you just had a feeling that there was so much talent coming in that Mansfield was a team to look out for. And, I mean, if we're being honest, Mansfield every year is a team that you sort of expect is going to reload. And King Philip now is at that stage. I mean, they weren't maybe a decade ago, but now they're at that point too, where you knew they were coming back with Robbie Jarest, the quarterback, and Ryan Halliday at running back. And honestly, that's all you really needed to know that they were going to be right there in the mix again.
Yeah, because their defense, at least the last 3 to 5 years, has been stout and very, very strong. And their head coaching, Brian Lee does a fantastic job. And I'm sure Coach Redding, I think he follows Coach Belichick one game at a time, but I'm sure they're well aware when the King Philip matchup. But what about some other teams, like maybe either the Davenport? Canton had a good year last year.
Canton and North Attleboro shared the title last year. I will say one thing for the Kelly Rex division: it's not, while KP and Mansfield are clearly the favorites coming in, and they've earned that right. Franklin pushed Severian to double or triple overtime, I can never remember which, in the playoffs last year, and they bring back a lot of talent in the skill positions as well. They're going to be a tough out, and Attleboro is a big, strong, physical team. There's no easy games, and Taunton seems to give Mansfield fits every year. So, the Kelly Rex, while those are the two favorites, it's certainly not cut and dry. And the Davenport might be even more wide open on the other side. Canton and North were the defending champions. North lost a lot of players in the skill positions. They're starting a new quarterback, Tyler DiMatteo, just a sophomore. A lot of talent, but inexperienced. And Canton brings back, similar to Mansfield, when you talk about preseason hype, Canton brings back so many players from last year's team, including almost their entire offensive line. Quarterback Johnny Hagan's back, and Kyle Fitzgerald in the backfield. So they're another team that expectations are very high for them. But the Davenport division is so loaded this year. With Milford put in a great performance against Franklin last week. Yeah,
that went, I think, over 600 yards passing.
Yeah.
According to your website.
Yeah, it was there that night. It was a great game, back and forth. And they're going to be a tough out. North Attleboro is always going to be a tough team to beat. They're coming off a loss against King Philip, but there's no shame in losing to King Philip. And they marched right down the field on the opening drive. Stoughton, I think, is going to be much improved this year. And Foxborough's another team that the history, you just assume that they're going to be, right there in the mix. So every year we say this, but the football in our league is top to bottom really strong, and encompassing 4 or 5 different divisions. We legitimately have teams that could make a couple of deep playoff runs.
That's great for the whole league. One thing as a fan I miss is that the Kelly Rex, they don't generally play at the Davenport.
Occasionally,
They used to have a great rivalry, Mansfield against North Attleboro.
Right.
But North Attleboro switched with Oliver Ames, and unfortunately, unless it's a Thanksgiving rivalry or a non-league.
Right. So a lot of teams have sort of picked up teams from the other side during the non-league schedule. KP will play North Attleboro, and then this Friday night they play Foxborough. So Brian Lee does like to, he likes to keep things within the league. He likes that tradition. And so they play North and Foxborough to get things started. Milford will play Franklin, and then this week they play Attleboro in their 2 non-league games. So we do get some crossover, although come next year that might not necessarily be a crossover game, depending on how things, as the realignment is happening
every
this
3
fall.
years it happens?
4, but I'm not sure if that's going to stay that way. As of right now, it's 4.
It's based on student enrollment?
It is, and last time when North Attleboro and Oliver Ames switched, I think it came down to something like 10 students. So there's 4 teams. It's Milford, North, OA, and Sharon that are right next to each other. And we're not quite sure who's going to move up. It could be any of the 4, but so it's potential that Milford next year could actually be a Kelly Rex game for a lot of these teams. But yeah, so
interesting. And it's
so
all,
some
all
of the teams look
sports.
that
Once
way.
they determine the divisions, it's across the board in every sport.
It is, yeah. So it's not like in some of the, it's not like in some of the sports with the MIA where, you know, you might have a team be D3 in soccer, but they're D2 in basketball, something like that. No, this is across the board.
So we'll leave football in just a minute, but one thing I think it relates to all the sports. Like, and I agree with you. I mean, not that my opinion matters, but I think the Hawkmock in football and other sports is very strong across the state. Do you and Ryan look at rankings? Because I know, you know, you feel like everybody thinks the Hawkmock is the best.
Right.
Some people think the Bay State is in football, or historically it was, and other sports. But do you guys look at any the Globe rankings or anything like that? Or
I mean, occasionally I'll click over, but it's more just to see, you know, where they put some of the teams. You know, like for instance, when we do our Hawk 5 rankings, we don't really rely on the Globe or the Herald rankings to do that. We determine that really on our own. Which is why a team like Canton will be 3rd in our rankings, but North Attleboro will generally be in the top 20 in the Herald or the Globe, because they're basing it on the history of the programs, and we're a little bit closer to it, so we can see that. You know, Mansfield and KP might be obvious choices for even the statewide publications. But when you're looking a little deeper down, you know, we can see, we know a lot more of the players, maybe we know a little more of the depth chart, and, you know, we know who's coming back, we've talked to the coaches, and so, yes, I do look at those rankings. I don't know how much stock we put into them. You know, we tend to do, and for ours is a little different anyway, where, I mean, obviously it's one league and we're basing it on, you know, really 5-6 teams.
I'm thinking in soccer, I think it's Max Preps that I usually look at, and I think football uses it. It's more statistically, and they strength of schedule, it's pretty good. But one thing, you mentioned Hawkmock 5, and again, if you're new to the website or the Hawkmock League, if your son or daughter's a freshman, first of all, you want to check out the site. But the Hawk 5, every week they do, I know they do football, both soccer, and field hockey,
Field hockey, volleyball, and golf.
Yeah, and you release it a certain day of the week, right?
Yeah, so it's football on Mondays.
Quite a tease.
And then we do girls soccer, boys soccer, field hockey and volleyball are both on Thursday, and then golf on Fridays.
That's good. And I know just from reading, coaches and players are aware of them. Again, you admit they're subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a team could be 4-2, and they could be ranked higher in the top 5 than a team's 5-1, based on your subjective, you know, well-informed opinion. And again, you know, I think I asked you this last year. Almost 95% of your feedback is positive, but occasionally you'll get some good-natured feedback, like, "Oh, we should be number 2."
I think the preseason one is the one that usually gets us the most. I don't want to say negative feedback, but the most questions. Once the season starts, it's, you know, teams have a tendency to sort of separate from the pack a little bit. Typically, usually there's a couple of spots that are going to be really close, but there's not usually 1 and 5. You know, the team in 5th there's not usually an argument for them to be number 1. But
you added On the Edge a couple of years back,
right? Yeah. So we have the team that's right there, and I think that, you know, once the season starts, there's a little bit less of that, but, you know, everybody thinks they're going to be the champion coming into the preseason, because, I mean, of course you want to think that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that tends to be when we get sort of those question marks.
Yeah, and they usually put a little narrative too, not just rankings, but they say why, or what's happened the past week and what's coming up. But we'll segue over to girls soccer. You know, mostly boys football, girls soccer. I know personally Mansfield, they had 3 great years. I think they were tied for, or they won outright, the Kelly Rex and the girls. This year, I think they graduated a dozen to 15 seniors.
Yeah.
And but who, and we could talk about that, but who looks strong in Kelly Rex and Davenport?
Sure.
Again, it's week 1 or 2, yeah.
Well, I mean, Mansfield, 3 straight league titles. I mean, they were, I believe, the first 3 in the leagues,
so.
in the program's history. Just an incredible run of success, and I was really happy to see for that senior class last year to get past the first round of the playoffs. They had had run into KP a couple of years ago and had some bad luck in that game. They've just had some tough matchups in the first round. They had Needham a couple of years ago when Needham ended up going to win the state title. So they've been really competitive, but I was really happy for them to get the win, and not that I was happy to see them beat KP, but just I was happy for those seniors that they were able to get that playoff win and make a little bit of a run. But yeah, when you lose 19 players from a roster and you bring back only one player that has more than a year's worth of varsity experience, it's going to be tough. But that was a good win against Attleboro. Attleboro's an up-and-coming team, and for Mansfield to beat them last night, and even the record now 1-1, I think was a big win for them. And Kevin Smith's going to have them ready to play every game. They're going to be tough to break down.
Yeah,
so
that's why a lot of the Mansfield, a lot of the Hawkma coaches, they're such good coaches, and I'm sure he likes the challenge. You can't always be loaded, but I mean, that's what,
And Kevin's always very honest. I can always go to Kevin and ask who's going to be good this year, pretty much across the state, because I know during the fall he's very soccer focused. He sent me an email, and I think it was January, to let me know about somebody committing to college, and at the end of the email it said 200 and some odd days to soccer season. So he's very focused on what's happening.
I think he teaches stats.
I think King Philip girls are sort of the pick this year. They're the team to beat. And when you bring back players like Chloe Lane and Avery Sneed, among I think 9 of their starters, 9 of 11 starters are back.
Feels like they've been playing for 7 years.
I know, and they've just dominated right from the start. And they both got to 100 points for their career last night.
Wow.
So they're 3-0. They haven't yet allowed a goal. Franklin's going to be a tough team to beat, as they showed last night. It was 1-0 against KP. They did a very good job of at least containing Avery and Chloe, and they're a strong team. And Tom Geison's another good coach who's going to have teams organized and ready to go every week or every night. And on the Davenport side, I think Foxborough is the team to beat, and I think that's pretty clear. They were the defending champs, and they brought back, as I mentioned with KP, Foxborough also brought back a ton of talent, including Kaylee McCabe, who was our underclassman of the year last year as a freshman. They went 4 years with Lily Sykes in the midfield. She graduates, and then they bring in a freshman who's just as good to take over. A very different player, but Kaylee's outstanding talent. So, and they beat Mansfield 2-0 in the first game of the season. And even Kevin had to admit, after Foxborough, really dominated the ball, that things have changed, because last year it was Mansfield that could dominate the ball against them. And this year it was a little sort of a changing of the guard, but this Foxborough team is loaded as well this year.
That's great. I was going to have a segue there. All the players. So you mentioned underclassmen of the year. So that's another in the awards section on the site at the end of the year. And they get little plaques, right?
They do, yeah.
But
so
there's talk about I know fall season, the fall sports, etc. But what kind of awards do you give out? It's subjective again.
It is, and we do football, boys and girls soccer, field hockey and volleyball awards. It's tougher because golf and cross country actually have league meets. So that in and of itself is sort of here's your awards, here's your all stars.
Right.
Whoever wins there, who finishes tops there. Similar to sort of like wrestling did it in the winter. They've kind of changed things up a little bit.
If you're the league does state champion, it's hard to.
Yeah, if you have a list of champions, it's already kind of set that those are the all stars. But we do those. Was it 5 sports in the fall? But
and then MVP, and you do underclassmen of the year, coach of the year, and then I know soccer you do your top 11 because there's 11 players in the field, and football's a lot because there's so many kids on each roster.
Football's tougher, and football's also tough because, as we mentioned, a lot of the teams don't play each other. So it really is a Kelly Rex and a Davenport league, where at least in soccer and the other sports, the teams do get to play everybody on the other side at least once. So, there is a little bit of crossover. Football's tougher because it's very much delineated. Here's one league, here's another.
Yeah.
But we do Hawk 5 for every position. We add athlete because some of the kids don't really
both
fit.
ways. Like
yeah.
Other quarterbacks might be D-backs, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's switch over to boys soccer if you don't mind.
No, of course.
Again, I know a little bit of Mansfield graduated. I think 7 or 8 kids, and unfortunately, they've gotten off for them a rough start. But who looks strong again? The Davenport and the Kelly Rex, and overall.
Yeah, I mean Mansfield. It's tough for them because there's a lot of upperclassmen on the team, and I just saw them last night against Attleboro and talking with Coach Sheridan after the game, and there's a lot of upperclassmen, but there's not a lot of experience necessarily because they had such a strong group these last couple of years. So it was hard to sort of find spots for the kids to step in. It's been a tough start to the season, but the game against Foxborough, they were right in it. Give away a late PK, and you lose 1-0, and then you have a game get rescheduled, and the Norton game. So the last 2 nights have been kind of tough, but I'm fully confident that they'll be able to get the pieces straightened out to make a run into the playoffs. I mean, Oliver Ames, as usual, is one of the teams to beat. Every year, year we come in saying, oh, maybe it's not not that great this year, but they're a really strong program. And
I know 2 years ago they graduated a team that won a state championship and was at the finals 2 or 3 times. Yeah. And I thought they were going to be down a lot last year, but they were right up there.
Still right, still right there in the mix. And I think Attleboro, I was very, very impressed by them last night. I think that they have the potential. They brought a player back from the Bolts Academy. They got a freshman that was very good in the midfield last night. So I think they're a team that has some potential. If they can score goals, that's been sort of the struggle for a lot of the teams the last couple of years. The Davenport side, Foxborough, their attack is one of the best in the league. Just talent-wise.
Again, Dylan Barrera feels. I know he had an older brother,
Anthony. Yeah.
Anthony.
So the name has been around for forever.
Again, great coach Joe Franchino used to play for the Revs.
So he's done a great job with them. North Attleboro is a strong team too. I mean, it's a little bit different because they tend to be more defense focused. Canton, I think, will be a little bit more defense focused as well. But those are two tough teams that are going to be tough to break down. Franklin, I think, is going to be really strong this year too. They brought a lot of players back, and Milford, the defending Davenport champs, and they're off to they don't have Wallace and De Oliveira, who was our player of the year last year. He was because of an age restriction, he wasn't able to play this year, but.
Because I thought he was a junior last year.
He was a junior, but they're just because of age, the MIA would have had to grant him a waiver. So he's not back this year, but they brought back a lot of talent, and they're scoring goals for fun to start the season. So they might be the most explosive team in the league on both sides. And I think I'm not sure that we have a team that, a couple of years ago, you mentioned OA getting the state championship games, and KP made a good run in D1 a couple of years ago. I'm not sure that we have a team that really stands out like that, but we have a lot of teams that have the potential that by the end of the season we could be talking about a deep tournament run.
Yeah, that should be interesting. We'll see what happens. As we go along in the season, I'll update the standings periodically. Again, one of the sports I don't know a lot about, there's a lot of sports, but field hockey, if you want to just touch briefly. Sure. Again, I know a little bit about Mansfield. Coach Teresa Nyan's been there for a long time.
Right.
Played in high school and played at Boston College, and great coach. And I think they're always kind of in the mix,
I think I think this year might be a year that they've been sort of third in the league the last couple of years behind KP and Franklin. KP lost a lot of players from last year's team. KP has been dominant the last 2 seasons. They were by far the league's leading scorers, but also by far allowed the fewest goals. So, it's a good combination. If you can do that, that's a good combination. Although Mansfield, I think, won or at least took points out of 3 out of the last 4 times they played KP.
Up well against them.
So, they would have a tough time against maybe some of the teams that they should have beaten, and then go out and beat KP the very next week. Mansfield brought back a lot, so I think this might be a year that they can, really challenge. It's only been a couple of seasons since they won the league title. I think 2015 was the last year. Franklin is probably the team to beat. They beat KP and Canton in their last 2 games. They beat Canton this afternoon. So that's a good sign. I think Franklin is a really strong team. Again, one of those teams that brought back so many players, and they have a freshman that stepped into the midfield that's very strong. But I think Mansfield is in the mix. I think Mansfield, we talk about coaches in other sports too, and Lisa Cropper is back she was the Franklin coach for almost a decade. She went to Dean College. She's back at KP. Okay. Teresa obviously at Mansfield. Michelle Hess, who's coaching Franklin now, coached Franklin, I believe, before Lisa was there originally. So, we have a lot of experienced coaches in the league that are Chrissy O'Connor, who won a state title at Canton, is coaching Canton again. So there's a lot of experienced coaches in the league that I think really helps, and our teams are, you're seeing that as our teams are making runs in the tournament. Canton, who lost to Franklin today, I think is probably the team maybe to beat in the Davenport division, but Foxborough should be right there as well. I mean, Foxborough has been really strong the last few years as well, and Melissa Bordieri, another really good coach. So field hockey is actually one of our deeper sports. I mean, I think we've really got some teams that have made some noise. Canton's been very unlucky the last couple of years because they've run into Somerset Berkeley and the boys in the playoffs. I know that draws a lot of controversy every November
last year.
Because Mansfield actually had a boy on its team a few years ago. It's a little bit different. I mean, these guys are legit players that are drawing attention nationally for men's leagues teams. So Canton's been a little unlucky. They've run into them in the playoffs. KP also ran into them in the playoffs last year. So maybe a little unfortunate there. Canton otherwise may have been in a sectional final 2 years ago if it wasn't for an overtime loss there. So they're a very strong team, and I think we have a lot of teams that can. I think we've had at least two teams in the semifinal for like 4 years in a row in D1.
That's
so
great.
Certainly a lot of depth there.
So as you could tell, I have a piece of paper which I don't refer to because I can't read my own writing, and somebody suggested don't wear the glasses this year. But Josh has no piece of paper, and it's just amazing all the teams, the coaches' names, a lot of the players' names, which you know a lot more. And so you obviously keep great stats and records and stuff, but you have to know it. You obviously your passion is here. You have to.
Well, gratefully we just started the season. If you ask me stuff about last winter and last spring, I might need a minute because it seems like between seasons you have to get so focused on what's happening now that it sometimes takes you a minute to remember some of the seasons past. But
we talked a little bit last year about imagine the organization that it takes. Him and Ryan Lanigan. It's still just a two-person show, right?
It is, yeah. So we actually had somebody covering a field hockey game for us today, which is nice. Occasionally we get some of the guys who have helped us out in the past. Maybe if they're back from college, they'll come and help us out. Or we try to encourage any high school kids that are interested in writing. If you write for your school paper or you just think sports writing would be interesting, certainly send us an email. Our contact information's on the website. We're always willing and we're always looking for people that can help out. Unfortunately, the kids that want to do that are probably the ones that are also playing, so it makes it tough.
Yeah, that's tough. But I mean, you guys have a great style. I mean, it all has. The articles are concise, yet they're really informative about what happened. And then, just again briefly, like getting the scores of the games, because you imagine we talked like 8 different sports you're covering, boys and girls, and you have the contacts with the athletic directors and the coaches. But how does that work? Just say on a given night, say like last night or tonight. How do you get the 15 or 12 games that happen? How do you guys?
Well, so if you look on our scoreboard from whatever day it is, and if you see information, that information came from the coaches. Sometimes we'll get scores through Twitter and other ways like that. If other reporters are there, or just a lot of the ADs now are using Twitter, so we can get a lot of the scores that way. But any of the goal scorer information or any little blurbs that we have about the game, all of that comes from the coaches. So we've been able to build up our relationship with not just the coaches, but also the athletic directors. So if we do have new coaches come in, the ADs are now on our side too to be able to say, hey, these, don't worry about it if these guys contact you, and you want to make sure that, who are these guys, emailing for previews. So luckily the coaches all know us from that too. So we get a lot of our information that way, which is great because, there's only 2 of us, so we can only be so many places, and it's great to be able to highlight as many different players and different games as we can.
And another thing on the site is photos, which I think not every game you could take a bunch of photos, right?
We try
some games
to, yeah.
You do. Some
Yeah.
games there's definitely a write-up, or there's always a write-up, and others, sometimes you don't have time, you run in someplace else and you take up
So we actually tend to go the other way sometimes.
Really?
So there are times if we're covering multiple games in a day, one of them might be just a photo gallery, and then one might be a write-up. We try to do write-ups if we can from both, but yeah, we try to get a photo gallery from every game that we're at. Some games are tougher because of rain or just field conditions being what they are. I know, for instance, North Attleboro football is back at Community Field this fall,
really?
and I know everybody loves Community Field, the drama and the neighborhood feel of it. As somebody who has to take photos there, it's less pleasant because it's.
Why are they back there?
Their bleachers can't hold a football crowd.
Okay.
So when they redid the field, they weren't able to also redo those. So while the other sports are still playing at Beaupre, the football team's going to be back at Community.
The away teams are probably that's a tough matchup because it's so small. There's no.
Well, everybody loves going there because it feels like Friday night football in a small town feel. Like I said, it's just from a taking photos standpoint, it's not the best.
And again, you're not trying to plug your website. That's my job to plug it. But if people want to, they can go on and look. But I mean, if parents want to purchase photos, they just contact you.
Well, so we use SmugMug as our photo sharing website. But if you go onto our site, typically the photo galleries will be listed there on the right-hand side. If there's one that you're missing, or if you're trying to find one from another game, I think we actually have a blurb on our homepage. We usually do. I don't know if we updated it. Last time I looked, it said spring, but we might it might be updated to say fall now. So there's a link right there. It'll take you to the photo galleries for this year. And SmugMug's pretty easy to get around if you need to try to find like last year's photos.
Yeah, I know for Hawk Player of the Week, you've shared a couple photos with us, which I appreciate.
Yeah, no problem. And we, and obviously for us, we also want those photos because if we do have a Player of the Week or we have awards or for any reason, we really want to be able to say a player does something even maybe down the road when they're in the next level, and we have these photos that we can fall back on as to use as well. So
that's right. So in addition to the things we've talked about, there's also stats on there. If your son or daughter plays any sports, I think most sports are on there except for cross country and I don't know, like volleyball. That's tough. There's digs and serve.
Volleyball is actually one of the easier sports for us, just because the coaches do such a good job of keeping the stats, or at least keeping stats is sort of. I don't want to say mandatory, but it's just a regular part of it.
Usually have a student manager doing it.
Yeah, and they all use MaxPreps as a website too, that they're keeping track of everything. So so for them it's very easy because they all keep it on usually iPads and they can just forward the information to us. But yeah, so our stats are, again, just like our blurbs on the scoreboard, that's required in order for those stats to be there, the coaches have to send it to us. Sometimes we have parents who want to be like, oh, my kid has so many goals, but it has to actually come through the coach. So if you don't see it up there, make sure you let your coach know to send in the stats. But we usually, for a lot of the sports, it might take a week or two before we start to do that, just because of the irregularities in the schedule at the start of the season. One team may have only played once. One team's already played. Mansfield boys, for instance, have already played 3 times. So we usually let it go for a week or two before they start getting.
And another thing
coming in for us.
Yeah, there's a history tab, which, and I think it's year 9 or 10 for the website. Or it's if you want to go back. This is great about Hawk Sports, but my kid hasn't played. Go back to 2012 or 2014 and look look at their records there. Because a lot of times now, I hate to say it, we could talk about this, but a little bit like Sun Chronicle, which I follow. Other than football standings, which I don't even know if they put in there, the other sports, they don't. And so, if you're a parent or a coach, you obviously know your team's record, where you stand. But that's what I think was great about the site, that it covers the non-traditional sports. Maybe not as much, but it gives them good coverage.
Well, I mean, football's tough. I mean, it's tough when in the fall in particular, because football, obviously, it's every Friday or in this case Saturdays now because of the Triple E and some of the games getting moved. But it's Friday nights. I mean, for the schools in general, it's a spectacle. It's an event. So certainly we're going to be there, but we try to get to as many of the other games as we can. Today Ryan's at volleyball, and we had somebody covering field hockey, and I probably would have been a field hockey today too if I could gotten out of work in time. So yeah, we certainly want to try to highlight as many of the different sports as we can. Some of them are a little bit tougher to cover. Swim in the winter, for instance, is a tough one to get to. Track in the winter is very difficult.
In Boston,
because it's up in Boston.
Yeah.
But yeah, we try to make it a point to get to, for instance, the golf Hockmock championships, the cross country Hockmock championships. We're always there to make sure that we cover those. So I think it's really important to be able to cover those things. And you mentioned the history. So we'd have league champions listed going back as far as we could. We do have some missing years so we took photos of all the banners that are up in the schools and tried to put it together as to who won when. But as I think we're all aware, that's not always accurate.
I know sometimes the schools are a little bit behind.
Yeah, and some schools started a little bit earlier, and some of the sports started a little bit earlier. So we're trying to keep track of that. So if you have information about any of the missing years that are up there, certainly let us know too, because we're trying to keep track of that as much as possible too.
That's good. And again, I asked Josh to come on, but we didn't talk last time about advertising. But if you want to talk briefly about it, I mean,
sure.
I know you don't overly sell it because but you guys, you and Ryan do a tremendous job. But if somebody wanted, like some local business wanted to advertise,
yeah, we do. We have a lot of different advertising packages. If somebody's interested, again, there's an advertising tab, I believe, still at the top of the website. So you can just click on that. Our contact information is there, and we do have a few different options. You'll see ads on our site. Mansfield Bank has run ads in the past with us. Mass Premier, which technically is Foxborough, but I know it's run by Mansfield head coach. I think everybody in the Hawks sort of claims ownership of it at this point. So
Sharon is over there a lot.
So so there is that option if people are interested, and we certainly will work with people to see if we can add to that. Add to our
I think I saw on your website today, it might be outdated, there were about 14,000 views per day. That might be outdated, but that's quite a lot of traffic.
Yeah, we've been getting 3 to 4 million page views a year over the course of the school year, which is I think great traffic for a school or a site that's covering 12 schools. It's 14 communities altogether, and the one thing that we always say if we're talking about advertising, but even just people interested in the site, it's very targeted. You're looking at a great market of 14 to from 14-year-old kids on up, and parents and teachers and friends. It's really a great community of people who all are very interested in what's going on in all the other towns. Even towns like Taunton and Milford that may have been a little bit late coming into the Hawk, they've really been embraced by all of the neighboring towns. So
that's great. I was going to say, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. What are you most looking forward to this year? I think I could tell by your energy, like you're always looking forward to the beginning of a new year. But I don't want to put you on the spot about predictions. But what do you either who's going to go the furthest, or what is probably going to be the closest title? Again, that's a wide open question given all the sports. But
no, that's a good question. And yes, our energy is usually much higher in September. If you see us in June, our energy level might be a little bit lower. But the start of a new year is always really exciting. I think that, we have I think the closest title might be, I think the battle for who can go furthest, Mansfield and KP football. I really think it comes down to the two of them when it comes to D2 and who gets to go to Gillette.
Right. Last year, Mansfield beat King Philip in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, the opposite happened.
I think it was 12-10 in the playoffs. It's always a game that comes down to the wire too. So it's not just close in terms of it's one game deciding the league. That game is itself really close. So I think that's probably one of the bigger battles to see who wins a league title. And who goes the furthest is tough, because we do have. I think Mansfield and KP have a legitimate chance of going to Gillette. I think Canton has a legitimate chance of getting there in D5 as well. I think KP girls soccer is one of the best teams in the state this year. So they're 2 years removed from winning the South. I think they could do it again this year. And I think when you have those two and their seniors, when you have Chloe Lane and Avery Steen, they're seniors. They've been so dominant, and they haven't actually won it all yet. That's a lot of motivation to try to close out your senior year and close out your career. So I think that they have a lot of motivation to try to make a run. So I think they have a legit shot. I feel like in every sport we have teams that have that chance.
Yeah,
and
it's
that
exciting. I know from
opportunity.
Mansfield perspective, when Mansfield, if and when they get knocked out, you do root for the Hawk, even though they might be your biggest rivalry. It's
maybe
great.
not Franklin. I understand that. I
I'm
understand
glad
that,
you said
but no, I think that's something that we see across the league too.
Yeah.
It's teams. Last year I'm covering the field hockey semifinals, and Canton and KP Franklin and KP are in each were playing a semifinal. And I saw Teresa was there,
Oh, yeah.
Chrissy O'Connor from Canton was there, other coaches and players, and there's always, like you said, it's a community, and you always see those players and coaches at each other's games, which I think is great. I think it's not always scouting. Sometimes they just want to be there and give their support, because there is a rivalry on the field, but there's also friendships behind it too, which makes it a lot of fun.
That's great. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I mean, again, Josh and I could talk a lot. He's got a wealth of knowledge, and I think it's a good way to kick off the fall sports season for Mansfield, but also the whole Hawk. And it is all about sportsmanship. And if you'll see Josh at the fields, whatever sport you're at, and he's usually pretty busy. So, but again, thanks for watching. And next time on Hornet Sports Buzz, we might have the boys soccer coach, or we might have the boys cross country coach. You have to tune in to find out. But thanks for joining. Thanks again, Josh.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.